Hey guys, welcome to the Perdie channel. I am your host, Matthew Perdie. I'm not sure if I should go with Matt or Matthew Perdie. I'm not sure. What do you think,
Matthew,
Paul?
yeah.
You think Matthew?
It's more elegant, I would just...
Ooh, yeah, more elegant.
Yeah.
Okay, I can go for elegant.
There you go.
So I have Paul Rugg here.
Hello.
The voice of Freakazoid and many other classic characters, particularly from the 90s, 2000s as well. So,
yeah.
How you doing?
I'm good.
What's new?
I'm here. It's raining. And so what better way to avoid the rain than to come in and talk to Matthew? See, that sounds better than to talk to Matt.
You know, yeah,
right?
I think you're right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, Matthew.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you can put more emphasis. You
That's
got more
right.
time to
That's
play
right.
with the
Yeah.
syllables.
Because it's like, Matt. Oh, was that the guy who changed my tires? No. Matthew is the guy that has the show.
That's true, but I typically go by Perdie in like my workplace.
That's fine, too.
I think Perdie is more fun to say, but the plosives, I got to back off with these plosives, man, because you know?
That's why we angle ours.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that. You know, so do you, when you're voicing, like, say, especially someone like Freakazoid who's all over the place, I mean, you can't really do it directly into the mic, really.
No, I would always do it. So there's always a mic stand here, and we always had engineers, and it was always above. So it was like, well, I won't do it now, but it'd be placed above so that when you yelled or did your P's and stuff, it wouldn't go, pie, but we would still, make many mistakes. But yeah, normally it was a stand, and then for the screaming, the engineer would always go, hold on. He would come and move the mic like 20 feet away and go, all right, go. And I go, blah, 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 and then, all right, stop. And then they come back in.
Wow. So then when you're doing that, were these cardioid mics you guys were using still?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you ever use a boom mic for that?
No. I think I did for a couple DreamWorks shows. For How to Train Your Dragon, I think we did. But for Freakazoid, it was just, yeah. And it's weird. It's like in Burbank, California, if you go down like Burbank Boulevard or whatever, there are all these buildings that look like they're homeless shelters, but they all house all of the studios. So it's like, and you go inside and and then you go inside and it's like, oh, they're amazing. But
so on the outside, it looks like a homeless shelter.
It looks like nothing. Like what? I wouldn't even. Don't park here, honey. Get your coat. Let's go. Sorry. And but there's like dozens of them. And if you just drive down from like Magnolia Boulevard all the way down to the end of that, and it's nothing but sound studio. So yeah,
that's amazing. We're gonna get to all this. First, we got to start out. Where'd you grow up, and how did you? Well, I'll save the other question. Let's just start with your origin story.
Yes.
So yeah, tell me about how you were raised and how you grew up.
Grew up in Van Nuys, California, which is in the San Fernando Valley, which is like middle America of the valley, and went to St. Elizabeth grade school, and Monsignor would come over when you wouldn't take your medicine, and back then Monsignors always were, I'm gonna give you a knuckle sandwich if you don't listen to your mother.
So good.
So yeah, and then my dad worked for Howard Hughes, worked for the Hughes Aircraft Company, and then when Hughes moved to Vegas, my dad came home once, and I had 3 older sisters, and I was like 6, and my dad came home, and I heard my mom kind of scream, and I was like, what happened? What's this? And then my sister said, we're all moving to Las Vegas. And I was like, what is that? And then I think my mom sobbed for another like 3 weeks, and we all pulled up stakes and moved to Vegas and lived at the Sands Hotel, which is no longer there. It's now the Venetian, but back then it was... back then it was the late 60s Vegas, and all men wore hats, and it was like...
Wow. That's a really different Vegas, I guess.
Yeah, it's a totally different Vegas. Very, it's sort of like the difference between Matthew and Matt. Back then, Vegas was Matthew.
Yeah.
It was very cool.
Elegant.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so they didn't have a house for us, so we lived at the Sands Hotel for like a year in a little suite or whatever, and... my sister and I, my 2 older sisters, were going to college, and I remember my mom I guess one day the maid came in, and because you have housekeeping, and the maid came in, and I was 6, and I was like, "You forgot a spot. You forgot to make my bed," or whatever. And my mom was like, "We're leaving. Like, we're getting a house now because this is not the way to raise kids." So so that was it, and it was cool. I loved Vegas. Great place to grow up. Great place to get into trouble. There was a lot of mafia. So it was like, Jimmy the Knuckles Noodles boy is going to school with you, and because he's dropped off by a limo. And so it was fun. It was fun.
And how long were you there in Vegas?
Till I went to college in 1980. So, yeah, it was my formative years. It was really fun. And what's funny is my best friend in high school is now the Archbishop of Portland. His name is Alex Sample.
That's so random.
Yeah. He's a great guy. He married, he officiated my daughter's wedding, and but yeah, it was an awesome place. It was a very family friendly place because back then, most of the people were like, "This is our industry, but this is not our life. Like, we know the rules." So I remember on Sundays, my dad would sometimes take us for a drive, and you'd see people like getting a hitch out of town, and he'd go, "Those are the people that lost. What have we learned? You never gamble. That's the business, but that's not what we all do." And everybody lived by that. And now it's different. I mean, there are a billion people there now, and back then it was really cool. So
at these formative years between 6 and college, whatever it was, 18, 19, right? Did you consider or think about voice acting at all, or what?
No. I was a fan of Mel Blanc, and Jerry Lewis to me was like the most brilliant human. I mean, I must be a little French or something because I was like, "Oh, he's brilliant," And so I was a big fan of that. And there was a show on at the time called The Copycats. It was a summer replacement. You don't even know what that means. Back there used to be, the networks would, on the summers, they would be like, "Well, let's try this garbage show. Let's try this show."
Oh, I see.
And it would be a summer replacement. It would be like six weeks. And there was a show called The Copycats, and it was impressionists. And it was Rich Little and Frank Gorshin, and it was just them doing impressions. And I remember I would record it. Back in the day, I would had a cassette player, and I would put it to the speaker of the TV and press record, and so I always loved it, but I didn't know, oh, that's what people do. Yeah, I was also a terrible student, so I was like, there's no hope for me. Nothing will ever happen in my life. But yeah, no, it never even occurred, ever.
Wow, that's kind of wild considering the success and where you ended up. When did it first occur that you wanted to try voice acting or get into that?
It was a fluke. So after I graduated college, I worked for ABC in management as their production manager of the talk radio network. It was awful. It was like the worst. I should never have been there. They should never have offered me the job. It was awful. And then I quit, or I got laid off. And then anyway. And some friends of mine said, "Hey, we've been thinking about it. You should really join an improv group." And I was like, "I don't. What are you talking about? That's weird."
Your friends think you're funny.
Yeah. And so they drove me to Encino and said, "You go. They're having tryouts." And I tried out for this improv group called the LA Connection, which is legendary for being just a terrible, scammy place where you pay a lot of money, but. And they basically took anyone with a pulse. So, but there was like, "You're in," and I was like, "Wow!" But I enjoyed, and we would do shows twice a week, and we did all kinds of improv, and then from there, I joined another group called the Acme Players with Adam Carolla and John McCann, and it was.
I recognize some of these names now.
Yeah, and we would write sketches. So we'd do a little improv, but mostly we'd write sketches and put them up, mostly for Adam's grandparents who would come. Like no one would sit in the audience. And then after some time, people started coming in, and we did like 3 shows a week, Fridays and Saturday, and that's where we learned sketch comedy, which is how do you get an audience to laugh? When are they not going to laugh? And it was like college. It was like a master class because so many people now, they've never had that opportunity to say, what in real life will an audience laugh at?
Yeah, you're actually getting to play it and try it out in real time.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And Adam and I wrote a couple bizarre sketches, and we all just really had a good time. So then when they were developing Animaniacs, Sherry Stoner, whose husband was our director at the Acme Players, Sherry Stoner, who was part of the Animaniacs development, said, yeah, hey, why don't you, we're doing this, we got this show, we'll give you a script. So she gave me a script, John McCann a script, and they said, here. And back then you would have a show Bible, and this is before the show was even, and it was like this thick, and Yakko will say this, and it was all this stuff. And I remember they said, you'll do the Animaniacs against Beethoven. And I was like, okay. And they had some, like a paragraph of this could happen, this could happen. So I wrote one, took me a week, because an animation writer at Warner Brothers specifically had to write the angles. Camera on Matthew. Camera pulls back over the shoulder. Pulls back to reveal. And it was all this stuff, and I was like, I'll never.
Is this in the screenplay format?
Yeah. Screenplay format, and it's like shots. And they did that because it was all hand drawn, so there couldn't be any. They didn't want there to be too much time in one scene where there wasn't a cut.
Right, makes sense.
So we would just draw that, but then so then they called me back the day I turned it in, and it was like I was married, we didn't have a dime, and they said, you want a job on Steven Spielberg's, and I was like, let me think about that. Yes. And so we just started writing scripts, and we wrote for about 2 years before the show premiered.
Wow, 2 years.
Yeah.
So I guess my question naturally is, like, why 2 years? What was we know animation takes a while, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. So back then it was all hand drawn. Yep. It was shipped to Korea and Japan and New Zealand, but the show order was for 65 episodes. So in order to pull that off, we needed two year run time.
I didn't realize there was that many episodes you guys started with.
Yeah, so that was the initial run. So it was fun. It was very intense, but we'd get into the office, and our boss Tom Rugg would say, "What do you want to do?" And I'd say, "I don't know. They go goof on Einstein." He'd go, "Great, you got a week." Yeah. And we would go into our offices. There was no writer's room. There was no group of us. It was just all of us in a hallway with offices, and we'd wander into each other's rooms going, "Hey, what about this?" And they go, "I don't think you should do that." And we would turn them in and get some notes, and then we'd go to Steven, and Steven would say, "Yeah, that's great." And then one day, with Einstein in particular, Tom Rugg, producer, said, "Why don't you be Einstein?" And I go, "Why? What, really? I can't do that." And he goes, "Can you do German?" I go, yeah, I can do that. That's very good. He goes, "Yeah, just why don't you be Einstein?" So I did my first ever voiceover session. So we had Rob Paulson, Tress MacNeille, Frank Welker, Jess Harnell, like the people that know what they're doing. And I was just like, I was scared. I didn't know what to do. I had written it, but I was like, And you're all in these little, you're in the same room, but you've got little separators between you. And they were just really nice, and I did it. And then after that, they'd be like, "You want to do another one? Do you want to do another one?" So I did a few. I did not every show, but every now and then they'd give me one. And then for Freakazoid, Freakazoid just kind of dropped on our laps it was going to premiere in September of 1995. This is December of 93, so there's a year, and the development had been struggling because Paul Dini and Bruce Timm, who are the Batman people, Steven wanted sort of this edgy sort of superhero, and they were working on it, which is what they do, and he'd be like, no, funnier, silly, and they were finally like, we're out, like, we don't get this. So it was dropped on my lap and John McCann's lap. Tom Ruegger was going to be our executive producer, and we didn't have any time. So we're like, Freakazoid's a crazy character. And everyone that came in, and we literally auditioned, I mean, the creme de la creme of voiceover. And they all played it like, and we were like, we're going to kill ourselves. We're like, this is awful.
So let's stop here. This is interesting. Now, I could ask some stuff about Animaniacs, but one question about it, because I don't want to spend too long on it.
Yeah.
65 episodes, putting money and production time into 65. Wait, when does that happen nowadays?
It doesn't.
So why were they so confident? And it did pretty well, right?
Oh, yeah. No, yeah.
But what gave them that confidence?
The show before was Tiny Toons. It did really well. It was the same team. It was Tom Ruegger, Steven Spielberg, Sherry Stoner. And then basically Warner Brothers was... We're in business with Steven, so this is awesome, and it's prestigious. And who else? Anyone else here doing animated shows with Steven? I guess we are. So they were very happy. Fox Kids was the ultimate, and they were like, we could really use a show. I think it was super expensive, and the way we wrote it was ridiculously expensive, and they would never do that today. We only wrote bits. We only wrote like
5-7 minute bits, things like that.
And we had no idea how it went together. And so about a year before we premiered, Tom Rugg would call us in and go, we got to put this thing together. And we were like, well, we thought you had a plan. He goes, I don't, we're all in this together, right?
Yeah.
So we started doing cards and saying, well, that one would go with this one. And then we decided, geez, we need some linkage. So we wrote little bits and stuff. And it was impossibly expensive, but it worked out great. It was like, I don't know, well, we need a little thing there, so let's put a little thing there. Would never be done today, but that's how we wrote Animaniacs. It was stream of consciousness, really. Yeah,
and I kind of feel like Freakazoid's that on steroids, particularly in the first season, right?
Yes,
so,
yeah.
Very fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
So, getting back to Freakazoid, then, when did you? Tell us about the moment that you first... Tell us. I'm the only one here. But tell us...
I'll pretend there's others. There's Matt and Matthew. And
Matthew and Perdie. No, it's the moment you first heard about Freakazoid. Now, this was... You're saying the original concept was way more serious, and Steven kept making it more comedic.
Yeah.
Right?
Bruce Timm and Paul Dini, the Batman the Animated Series, like the pinnacle of Batman.
Yeah.
For many.
It really was the pinnacle of Batman, with the voice and everything.
Yeah.
I get it.
And I think Steven wanted in on that, but he was like, let's do something like something a little funnier, like a superhero with comedic overtones. And then Steven, I think, would read an Animaniacs script and go, but more like this. And they were like, but Steven, I don't know. So, it was a rainy December. I remember that much. I was working on Animaniacs, or we had just been renewed for the next 65.
Wow.
And, or for 100. We were going to get to 100 because 100 is the magic number.
I see.
So it was like, okay, I guess I'm doing that. And, Tom Ruegger came in and said, you're working on a show called Freakazoid. Merry Christmas. And I was like, what's that? So there was some development, like it's this crazy guy. And John McCann and I weren't really we weren't the superhero fans. Like we're comedy writers. And we're like, why have you done this to us? We don't. And so I remember we spent the early part of December. Okay, his name is Freakazoid. He turns into Freakazoid from Dexter Douglas, and we spent a week. And we're like, he must turn into Freakazoid when Dexter uses the garage remote. Yeah, okay, that's it. And I remember Tom Ruegger goes, I don't care. We don't have time for this. Start writing.
Wow.
And So obviously we're comics and we're going to start writing weird stuff. We just started writing anything, like, and using an announcer and breaking the fourth wall constantly.
Yeah.
And so John wrote the first one called Dance of Doom. And we auditioned people for that. And we were like, we can't find Freakazoid. So Tom Ruegger told me, why don't you go in the booth and just show them how you think it is. And I was like, well, okay, so meaning everyone was at 10 or at 100, and I was like, well, Freakazoid should be maybe a little 5, a little this, a little that. So
Freakazoid's a range, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it's a
huge
range.
right. And so I did that, and then I thought, and Tom says, so great, we're going to play that for people that are auditioning. But he played it for Steven, and Steven said, just have Paul do it. So It was like, so Tom said, you're going to be the voice of Freakazoid. And I was like, oh, no, because I really wanted to write. And I was like, but that'll get in the way, and but anyway, that's how it happened.
That's fascinating. So I want to hear more about the audition process, because that's fascinating to me, because I imagine there's other voice actors out there, aspiring voice actors, and just people in general interested in how this goes down. So I'm thinking about like, you're saying most of the people that came in, is this Los Angeles now?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So you're in Los Angeles, people are coming in, and they're saying they see something like zany or crazy.
Yeah, so everybody was sort of doing The Mask.
That was popular.
At 100.
Yeah.
And we're like, we're dead. We're dead. Because that energy, it's fun for like 30 seconds, but then we have to go somewhere else.
It's exhausting, I guess.
And and we were just like, man, this is not working. And now, had we known all that and gone to one of these better voice actors and say, you know what, we've just remembered it should be at a 10 and then go to a this, they probably would have done it like better. But Tom didn't want to wait, so he just played my thing for Steven and said that just, and also what Tom did with me, which he didn't do with the other actors, was because of my improv background. I remember it was Dance of Doom, which has the whole low bridge, everybody down, low bridge.
Yeah.
Tom would stop the recording and go, no, what are you going to do when he says low bridge? Do something. And I go, what are you going to do? He goes, just do that, anything. Just go and be silly. I'll record for like 5 minutes. And he recorded for 5 minutes, and I'm like, low bridge, everybody down. Everybody come, bring it down, bring it, and all this weird stuff. And I'm like, this is garbage. Like, no one is this is what on earth? And played it for Steven, and Steven was like, this kind of weird, let's do that. And then that sort of informed what Freakazoid would be. First season of Freakazoid is a lot of improvisation.
Right.
Where we'd go, okay, now, I'll do this, and then I'll go off. And for some reason, Jerry Lewis, like I would...
Jerry Lewis.
I would always do. I would do the smart Jerry Lewis, the one who's like unctuous and lugubrious and uses words that he doesn't quite understand for euphemisms. And I would just do that, and then that just became a thing. But it was just none of it was planned. Nothing we did in Freakazoid was planned until we started going, okay, let's do that. Which is why the second season is my favorite season. Number one, it was a total screw you to Warner Brothers because they hated the first season. And they said, I remember sitting there with Steven and the head of Warner Brothers and all the others about a second season. And they said, it's too weird. And Steven was just listening, like it wasn't Steven's idea. And they go, so we've decided you're only going to do half-hour stories, and you're going to tell a story. And that'll make it better, and you won't do your weird stuff. And I remember John McKenna and I looked like, fine, that's fine. And then they wanted to put a laugh track on it. And we were like, no, you can't really do that. So the second season, we learned everything we learned and made it even weirder. In many cases, but instead of improvising, we now wrote to that. We're like, okay, I get it.
Yeah, so. It kind of leveled you guys out a little bit based on the feedback and everything.
But it was, I've never had a job like it where it was so just free. And especially with Freakazoid, everybody was so busy with all their different shows, and there wasn't a lot of time. And I think Steven was making, he was in pre-production on Saving Private Ryan. So he was, I think he was in Europe or whatever, and he was just like, yeah, go, it's funny, silly, weird, and we're just like, okay, I don't know. And the first time we saw the cut of Dance of Doom, I was like, we are so dead. This is an awful, awful show. But it all worked out.
Well, it's actually interesting because it's a cult classic now, and we're obviously looking back on it. You see how brilliant and amazing and hilarious a lot of stuff is, and classic humor. I mean, I remember I rewatched the whole first season. I got through most of the second season the past few days. It was the Freakazoid marathon, but the Dance of Doom is funny because you don't even start with the origin story. Mm-mm. That's like 6 episodes in.
Yeah.
You start with this dance, and the purpose of the dance is to honor daylight savings time. Which I mean, I cracked up so hard. I'm like, that's so random. And then you got the caveman, who was subscribed to the New Yorker.
I subscribed to the New Yorker.
It's so good. So good.
That is all John McCann. So John McCann, my writing partner on Animaniacs, and we also Tom Ruger wrote, but John just had a way, and because John didn't want to have to write a story or figure anything out, it was like, let's just do it this way and just be silly. And John wrote the announcer. It's Dance of Doom. And that was just going to be a one-off. And then I heard it, and I go, well, I'm going to use an announcer from mine. And John just wrote Cosgrove, the original Cosgrove, as a one-off. We'll never see him again. There was no plan. There was no plan to have Freakazoid have this friend who's a cop. But Andre Romano said, I'm going to get you Ed Asner for that. And we're like, hey, that's awesome. That's fun. But we thought that what a fun guest star. And as Ed Asner, as we were all in the studio, and he was sort of, the mic was on, we were in the other room listening, and Ed sort of going, hey, Freakazoid, you want to go, blah, blah, blah. And he's just reading it to get, and we go, stop, that, we want that. He goes, I'm just reading the script, I'm not acting yet. We go, that's what we want. He goes, all right, I'll do what you guys want, that's fine. And so he would come in and not act every episode. And it's one of those things. I wish I could say, yeah, we planned everything out. But one thing was another thing. And it was sort of like, I think what was so fun about it was we were just discovering this thing, which you would never get to do today because you'd have 1 million people breathing down your neck going, what is it? When is it ready? And so it was a gift. And what I learned was you don't need 1 million people and advising, and you just trust people. And the president of Warner Bros. Animation, Jean McCurdy, she allowed all of this chaos to occur. And she would say, win me Emmys and never embarrass me. And then she would run away and she would take care of us. And that's unheard of. She was like, you're my people. She's managing this mayhem of weirdness, and she would just that's why I learned management style of hire the people, let them do their thing, win me Emmys, and never embarrass me.
And that's kind of going back to something you mentioned before we got started with Spielberg, and that it sounded like he would take like something like your idea with like the narrator, or excuse me, the head of the Motion Picture Association, and was like, yeah, that's good. And he would ratchet it up. He would encourage you, right? So tell me about how that relationship was. Was he doing that a lot often?
At the very beginning, yes. We would go to, when we were developing Freakazoid, we'd go to Amblin, and it was always, you'd walk into Amblin and go, I'm at Amblin. And there would be the E.T.'s spaceship, and you'd go, spaceship. And there were who's the amazing American painter Rockwell's. There were original Rockwell's all over, and the air smelled fine and dandy, and it was And the fries there, he had a personal chef, and the fries were, it was amazing.
You gotta have good fries.
Yeah. And you'd go in and you'd sit at the thing, and he'd come in, he'd be like, so what, and then, and it was weird. In fact, I was reading a couple months ago, I was going through all my files, and there was someone had taken one of our meetings and transcribed it. And the conversation just wanders. And I remember me saying something like, oh man, something about The Crawling Eye, which was an old movie. And Steven would go, I love The Crawling Eye. And I go, yeah, it's great. The crawling, yeah, and the next thing you know, it's like, we should do something about The Crawling Eye. And it would just go away. So, we'd go away and write something. And Steven would, he'd be like, it's right, Crawling Eye. Jack Valenti, get him. I can get him, and you can use him to introduce things. And it was all that weirdness that is just a bunch of pals sitting in a room. And Steven was always incredibly gracious. Never played like I'm Steven Spielberg. He got in there and he played, and he'd be like, "Okay, great, bye, see you later. Well, I'm gonna go make a movie. You guys make your little show." And it was great. It was great. Very nice, man.
Yeah, it sounds like the first season, even just watching it, you know that you guys are having fun with a sandbox of stuff and just kind of... And I think maybe that's part of what... I mean, just looking from like an outside perspective, part of what I found kind of original and fascinating about Freakazoid is the experimental aspect of it, but also like the fact this comedy is often spontaneous and just like... dudes sitting together and having fun and discussing something ridiculous. And so in watching the first season, you've got like the second episode with was it Candlejack, right? It gets to like the climax, and then a guy comes on screen and explains the rest of the plot of it, and then it just ends. Right? It's just but that the kind of thing was like at the time, fourth wall breaks in cartoons like that to that extent. I mean, Looney Tunes did like a cute like turn towards the camera once in a while or whatever, but this was like that on steroids. There's nothing like it.
Yeah, I remember that particular episode. So that was my first script. So John's was Dance of Doom, and then mine next up was Candlejack, and I remember being like, none of this matters. It's not. We're just. And I would, in the office, do an impression of Paul Harvey. And Paul Harvey used to be he had this commentary that he would do. I'm Paul Harvey, good day. And he would tell the story about, that man's name was Helen Keller. And, the story of his life. And I would always do it, and they'd say, Paul, shut up. We don't want to hear that anymore. So when I got to that one part of Freakazoid, which is like, oh man, I gotta figure out what happens now. And then I just wrote, what if Paul Harvey came in and like explained what happened? And I didn't pitch it out. I just wrote it, and it just felt right. It felt like, oh, we don't need to end this, because this is, who cares? Now, so we broke every rule for comedic effect, and also because I didn't want to figure out how he fixed it. I just wanted to say, and I wrote another one like that where it was in the second season called Dr. Mystico, where they have to break out of a cage. And I was like, how are they going to get out of the cage? And I was like, oh, well, what if the Freakazoid production assistant comes and brings them a key? And I remember I pitched that to someone, and they go, you can't do that. You can't. Whoa. You can't. And I was like, I think I can. I think we're going to try it. And so that's how they get out of that jam. And the production assistant also brings their messages and coffee.
And he builds a runway too, right?
Yeah. And it was, you can't do that with every show, but that's how we set Freakazoid up.
Well, it's almost like because you guys started out in such a chaos, right, of different content, it almost like opened the floodgates and made it more acceptable moving forward, right, in the second season. So when you did do it, it was like, oh, okay, it's Freakazoid being Freakazoid, right?
Yeah. I mean, it was that, and especially in second season, John would have a script, and then mine was due, and then John would have a script, and then mine was due, and we just were sort of ping-ponging off each other, and it was fun.
Well, it's like I feel like in a way you kind of have a more dense comedy, because you guys seem to be doing a lot to either avoid exposition or do it in a way that's not forced into the plot. It's just like forced and fourth wall breaking and forced and doing something fun with it, right? It's like, well, if we have to, I'm just guessing what the mindset is. It's almost like, it just seems like to me, oh, well, we have to do this exposition. Well, we can either skip it or we can just like do this ridiculous way of explaining it and have fun with it, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what we did. And also, I really wanted John to laugh at my script, and John really wanted me to laugh at his script. So it was like, we'd had to throw stuff in that we'd be like, that was stupid, that was really dumb. And that's just how we did it. And it's taught me, then sort of leaving Warner Brothers and going to the other companies, it was like, oh, this is not how it is everywhere, and it was like, oh, well, that was a major disappointment, because it was Freedom City, and then you go into more buttoned down, this is what a story is, and here's an example. We never wrote an outline. It was just there was no outline. It was like
when you mean for per episode, or like for like the whole thing?
For the whole thing. We didn't know where anything was going, and it was like John would come in and go, I'm gonna do a Mission Impossible parody. And I go, have a good time. See you in 2 weeks. And I would say, we're going to do a parody of Amadeus, whatever, because kids love Amadeus. And we would just write it. There was no like writing it out and an outline and turning an outline in or a premise and then expanding that into something bigger. And then we just wrote. We just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. So.
Yeah, and so I'm gonna rewind you a little bit to some of the people that were coming in and were over the top. Did you have anyone that was like underperforming, that was just kind of boring?
Yes, we did, and she got replaced. Yeah, she was a very famous actress who was going to be Cobra Queen.
Wow. And
it was very famous, and that's the one where, because I won't, I mean, that's sad when people get replaced, but it was like, it had never done cartoons. And Andrea Mann like, I have this person, and we're like, oh my gosh, it's going to be great. And this thing, without this face and the acting and the hands, just confounded her. Because she was used to physical acting. I'll express it with this, or I'll do this, or I'll turn like that, and it's all got to be here. And anyway, but yeah, so that's the one person that never worked out. But everyone else, Andrea Romano, who directs, she directed SpongeBob, and she, Batman the Animated Series, and Animaniacs, and Tiny Toons, and everything that you've ever heard of. She would just come in and go, I can get you Ricardo Montalban. And we'd be like, why would he want to do our stupid show? And she goes, oh, he'll do it. And so Ricardo Montalban, Tim Curry, Jonathan Harris, which is a funny story about him joining. You probably don't know who he is, but he was Dr. Smith in Lost in Space.
Okay, yeah.
When you're my age, Lost in Space was the show when I was like 8, and it was amazing.
Right.
And David Warner, who played the Lobe, and he was every villain in every movie from Time Bandits to whatever. And just really great actors, and they would come ready to play. They didn't throw their weight around. They just wanted to have pizza, which we had at 1 o'clock, and for an hour everyone would talk, and then we'd get into the studio, and they would just do their lines, and sometimes really big. And David Warner, who's literally a Shakespearean actor, we made him he played the Lobe so silly. And we thought, we're going to have to explain to him. But he was like, he got it. And the only time he ever panicked was when I wrote a musical number for him to sing. It was called It was called Bonjour Lobie, which is think of Hello Dolly.
Yeah.
And I remember he came into that session. He goes, please, I don't want to sing. And we go, David, that's the whole point. However you do it is going to be great. And he was great. And
That was classic.
Yeah. But again, that's about a 5-minute musical number in the middle of a kid show.
That was the first episode of the second season, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No one said don't do that because everyone was too busy, and I was like, well, let's do this. Like, let's parody this thing. And I remember we did a shot-for-shot parody, shot for shot.
It's so good.
We had one of the storyboard artists just break it down, and actually we did it twice because the first time the board artist just took it and made it weird with flying sandwiches and whatever, and I said, guys,
no,
it's shot for shot.
That's the point,
and
right?
they go, but it's not funny. I go, it's shot for shot, and we did that, and
good call, by the way.
Oh well, you
Good
know,
call.
you sort of have an instinct, and it was like, and the other thing too is that someone's got to draw this, someone's got to board it out, and we would always look at the boards, and generally it was like, yep, good angle on that. Oh no, that joke's no. So you'd have to sort of say, I think this is the joke. But yeah, so just stupid stuff like, and then Norm Abram. We got Norm Abram. People don't know who that is, but there was a show that used to called This Old House on PBS where he would do carpentry. And one day it was a joke. It was like, that'd be great. Freakazoid should team up with him. And the next thing I know, Norm Abram is flying in to do that. And
that's so good.
Yeah, so it was fun.
Well, it's like, it seemed like a classic mix of, it was a sandbox. You guys had the freedom. You had the spontaneity. So like you could even improv some of your lines, right? I imagine you're doing that a lot. And on top of that, you've got all these legends, right? Within like arm's length.
Yeah.
Right? And it's just this weird, like, I mean, there's nothing like Freakazoid, really, in that sense. Another observation I thought was interesting to think about is the whole idea of, I think in Animaniacs, you see this a lot, is how a lot of episodes revolve around trolling a certain character, right? So, was it Dr. Scratch and Sniff, right?
Yeah.
Big one is like, they're always trolling him.
Yep.
And it's like, okay, so like they control, like you're saying, like Einstein or this guy here, and it seemed like Freakazoid was sort of like built around that idea a little bit in the beginning, right? And he still does that pretty much the whole time, to varying extents in plot lines. But it's very interesting to me that he's kind of a look at what the internet's become today, a big place for trolling and like goofing on people, and really Freakazoid's kind of ahead of its time in that sense, right? Because Freakazoid itself is an amalgamation from the internet, right? Is that right?
Yep,
everything from the internet in one person, right? Superhero. How did you arrive at the idea in this rush situation to go, oh, there's a new thing called the internet, and a bunch of nerdy people use it, so we're going to use this as a source of his superpowers.
Yeah, I think that, well, first of all, the idea that he's a product of the internet was Tom Ruger's idea, and we were all like, sounds good to me. Like, I don't know what that means. Do you know what that means? Nope, I don't know what it means either. But it would explain his manic abilities. But we had no idea. We had no idea what any of that meant. But also, it was the first time during Animaniacs we learned about, like fan groups via the internet and stuff. And we even made fun of it, called Please Get a Life Foundation. And we actually brought those people when we found there was this group that talked about Animaniacs a lot. We invited them to come to the Warner Brothers. But anyway, so we were very well acquainted with that of fan culture and the internet and sort of all that. But it was also, we were just like, let's have him be a product of the internet. Yeah, that's a good idea. And was just a MacGuffin. It was like,
Well, it's a pretty interesting MacGuffin considering like just how he is, right?
Yeah.
He sort of has like a randomness. He pulls from anywhere, right, to do anything.
Yep.
I don't know. I just think that today it would be very fascinating to have Freakazoid in the modern amalgamation of the internet, all the ways that it's advanced and regressed, I guess you could say. In certain ways.
There was talk of them bringing it back for a while, but I think that sort of fell apart.
When did that happen?
Like 2020 or 19, they actually contacted
So during
me.
COVID.
Yeah, they actually, it was
pandemic apocalypse.
It was right before COVID, so 2019, and they contacted me and were like, "Hey, and it was kind of like it was so lame because they called me. And
Who's they?
The Warner Brothers, so
Okay.
the management then, who were none of the original people. And this guy called me and goes, "Yeah, we're thinking of, maybe, doing Freakazoid again." I was like, "Absolutely. You only got 2 seasons. Let's do another." So before I started thinking about the script, he said, but, you know what I really want? I want, when you start the show, have Freakazoid, punching people and doing karate chops, because that's what the kids want. I was like, "You've never actually seen Freakazoid, have you?" And he was like, "Well, no, I mean, I've heard of it, right?" And I was like, we're dead. We're dead in the water. So I wrote a script that basically picked up on the day Freakazoid wins the Emmy. It was so dumb. And I was like, "Cosgrove, we won an Emmy. Woo!" And then the Loeb captures Freakazoid. It was just stupid. It was a dumb reboot. And I thought it was fine. And I never heard from them again.
Wow.
They just were like, So clearly the whole karate chopping thing.
So this is like the lost episode in a way.
Yeah.
I want to hear more about this lost episode. I mean, you call into it, but I mean, it's all ridiculous.
Yeah, no,
right?
that's the point. It was dumb. It's literally started with Freakazoid and someone saying, and the Emmy for best animated program special class is Freakazoid, and Cosgrove and Freakazoid, and Cosgrove is like, "I'm gonna faint. He goes, "Cosgrove, you're fine. I'm gonna faint." Oh boy. And Freakazoid gives the dumbest speech, and then the Loeb comes in and was like, "So you think you won?" And then he captures them. He sends Freakazoid off into a time lock somewhere. So then we go 20 years later, and Cosgrove is sitting in his apartment alone, and it sort of gets the band back together. And I think Freakazoid comes out of being in this netherworld for 10 years or being locked in the internet, and he really had to use the bathroom. And,
that makes sense. Yeah.
But anyway, it was just typical.
That's hilarious.
It was typical Freakazoid, and the Loeb more or less just wants to have battles. That's his thing in life.
Yeah.
Not really take over the world.
Yeah.
Not really take over the world. But I think it just, within that environment, when they were working on Animaniacs, the reboot, it didn't fit all the boxes that they wanted checked and stuff. Plus, to be honest with you, I just don't think, I'm sure right now they're working on a Freakazoid reboot that I have no idea about. And
whoa.
No,
how can they do that?
Well, they can do, but that's what they do all the time. That's the story of Hollywood, right? Tom Rugger, the creator of Animaniacs, wasn't invited back to be part of the reboot. The man that created
that would explain a lot.
It would. It would. What happened with Animaniacs is they forgot who the Warner Brothers were Yakka, Wacko, and Dot. And you said they were trolls, right? They took the trolling away and had them be acted upon by people. And that's not Bugs Bunny. That's not what Bugs did. I mean, Yakka, Wacko, and Dot were collective bugs. They're winners. They're Groucho Marx. So anyway, but I digress.
That's fascinating. I got to ask more about, this is such a rare opportunity.
Yeah.
Have you spoken about this lost episode before?
No.
Okay. So let me ask more stuff about it. Because, it's a script that you handed to him.
I did.
So in it, when we go to Cosgrove 20 years in the future, you said he's in an apartment. Was he kind of depressed or what's going on?
No, I think he's I don't remember. I can actually get the script for you.
love that.
He's sitting there. He's retired. I remember. Freakazoid went into a computer. Right, he got locked in a computer. So it's Cosgrove, for 20 years, has been trying literally every day to get him out of the computer.
Aw.
And so...
It's a good friend.
Yeah, finally Cosgrove gets him out of the computer. And then Cosgrove makes him a sandwich. And... because the relationship, Cosgrove and Freakazoid is this beautiful, fun relationship, right?
Yeah.
Two best friends.
And they're opposites in a way.
Yeah.
Right? Because, Ed Asner, his character, Cosgrove was so grounded and just real.
Yeah.
And Freakazoid's kind of...
Yeah.
But yeah, go on.
And then I recall Cosgrove gives Freakazoid his call to action. You know what you should do now that you're back after you finish your sandwich? we should go get the lobe. And Freakazoid's like, hey, okay, you think so? Yeah, and something like that. I don't remember everything. And then they go to track down the lobe, but Freakazoid gets distracted at a farmer's market with all the soaps. And I don't know why they made me laugh. Like, man, there's so many soaps. This is great. So, and then it ends like they always did with a battle and, or a quasi battle. But it was just, dipping a toe back in the water, like, whether you like the script or not, can we, let's talk about it or whatever. And I never heard a word. Put in a drawer, and that was it. That was it. And they said, well, they were like, Steven's really But then they decided to bring Freakazoid back for something called Teen Titans Go.
Yeah, I actually saw that clip.
Yeah.
And you voiced him for that,
I did.
right?
I did. So they brought me in. They actually let me do a rewrite on it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
okay.
but they were big fans of Freakazoid.
Nice. And that's a comedy show itself, in a way.
Yeah. And they were like, hey, here's a script. You want to do anything with it? And I just added a few things. But
what changes, can I ask? What changes can you talk about?
Well, they weren't really changing. It was just plussing. Like,
okay.
I think Freakazoid, and it's probably from the script I've written before, Freakazoid it has been locked in this film canister, and he finally gets out. And there's one of the characters shows him a phone, and it says something like, you can watch TV while you potty. And Freakazoid goes, cool, can I borrow that? And he goes out, and he comes, and it's just really stupid things. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have I believe Robin's character is annoyed by Freakazoid the whole time. He doesn't want to bring him out. But everyone else loves him. Yeah. Right? He's like, oh, he's so annoying. He's so stupid.
And they actually got David Warner to come out of retirement.
Wow.
And he passed away shortly thereafter, like almost a couple months. Ed Asner came and did it. So it was crazy. And I stupidly, I didn't go to that session so I did mine alone because I was doing something else called Earth to Ned, this show, so I wasn't able to. But in hindsight now, I would have definitely gone.
Well, it's hard. I mean, how do you know that? You don't know something like that's going to happen. Yeah. Imagine, especially because this guy's been around forever.
Mm-hmm.
So. Gosh, there's so many things I'm curious about. I guess the one thing I have to ask is, you being the voice actor of Freakazoid and also a writer on those episodes, what was that creative process like? How would you formulate these episodes in writing? Would you think about, it'd be fun to have an excuse to say something like this, or how did that go?
No, it was weird. It was I think once I figured out I became the voice of Freakazoid became the less interesting character to me. It was weird. It was I didn't want to. I had more fun writing Cosgrove or writing the Lobe or writing whoever the villain du jour was, because I knew that we would just do something weird and stuff with me. But I almost toned down my writing of Freakazoid a little bit, because I was more interested in Cosgrove. I was like, he's the guy, or the Lobe, or his stupid ideas, and all the other things. There was one I wrote called The Cloud, which is the crawling eye, right? The one that Steven suggested, and another shot-for-shot parody at the beginning.
Yeah, it's classic.
And I was just having more fun with everyone else's dialogue and all this stupid stuff, and the professors and everything. And really, if you look at that one, Freakazoid is this normal character, and everyone else around him is ridiculous, from the Lobe to. So I tended to write Freakazoid as, I guess I got to write him, because I also didn't want to. Normally, when we record, the writers or the producers, writers, are in the booth, watching through the glass the actors. And I didn't want to be one of the actors. I wanted to be in the booth to go, I think maybe you should do it a little bit less, or do it like this. So what they would do with me is we would record everyone else. I'd go in there for a rehearsal, and then for the actual recording, I'd step out, so that I can contribute notes and stuff. Wow. And then when everyone's gone, I do my thing alone. until I was comfortable with everyone, and then I would just go in there with everybody, and we would do it together.
Yeah, that's kind of relatable in a way. I mean, I don't do voice acting, but just not being particularly comfortable with your own performance. It's extremely self-critical, right? To the point.
Yeah, I had so much more fun being on the other side of the booth and watching Ed Asner go duty water. You know what I mean? Or poo gas, duty water. Or Ricardo. When we finally got Ricardo Montalban, and I'd written the script, and I remember when it came to this whole part where he's got to do Khan from Wrath of Khan, and I went in and I said, because I'm stupid, and I was like, Ricardo, here you're being Khan from Wrath, and I remember he goes, I understand the joke, my friend. I understand. Yes, this is what I will do. Thank you. Right, and it was like, yeah, I got it, and he was, and he did. He knew exactly. We didn't have to say anything to him. So, but sometimes it was real fun to be in that booth and watch the actors and be able to contribute small things. But generally, we didn't really tell anybody anything.
Well, that's interesting because, I guess looking at a character like Freakazoid, who I mean better than anyone, the range is wild, and yet it's almost like a worst case scenario for someone who's a little self-critical, especially because you hadn't voice acted you hadn't voice acted a ton of characters previously, and you're having to portray this character that's all over the place with the range, and yet you can't watch it in real time because you have to do it right. That's a frustrating thing to work through. Yeah, do you have to just shut off that judgment valve when you're doing it, basically?
Yeah, you and especially when we first started, I would do it pretty much alone. Everyone had gone, and then Tom Rugg, who would be in charge, and Andre Romano. When I was in there, and John McCann, it was like, all right, now do this, Paul. Hey, go do something weird here. I think there's a thumbtack under my fanny or something like that. I would just say, and they'd go, great, and we're going to put that in. And I didn't know what any of it meant. I had no idea what any of it meant.
So good. And you would just improv some of this stuff sometimes just for fun. Yeah.
Within certain things, because John McCann was a very precise writer. And normally, writers want, I'm a writer, and you don't touch my words, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes when Rugg would say, go off here and do that, I'd look at John and be like, is this okay? And he'd be like, yeah, it's fine, but don't go too far. And that's why they're little moments. They're in the pilot where he yells at Jeepers. Jeepers says, would you like to see something strange and mystical? No, get out of here with that watch, would you? Lay off the whole beavers. Yeesh. And then Tom would go, more, and be like, I go have some coffee with cream or something, because I'll tell you something, this is a happy place.
So good.
And that's just all to happen, and we done, I don't know. That's just what we did.
I mean, I think I think there's a lot of people who would prefer someone like Freakazoid around when someone's being really creepy.
Yeah.
I'm sure might have a fan or two walking up that's kind of crazy.
Yeah. You're a creep. Yeah.
It's I could use a Freakazoid in my pocket for situations like that. I mean, not to say I run to it too much, but imagine some people could use that. Gosh, I mean, there's a million questions to go on in this. Trying to think which one to go to. Okay, so all right, talking about John McMahon. What is it?
John McCann.
McCann. Yeah, I only started seeing the name more recently and just rewatching all the episodes. He was behind the Venice Beach segment, right?
Yep. Hey man, hey man, I want your money. Yeah, that is John McCann. So John is one of the smartest guys I know. He's a former MP in the Marines. He's seen a bunch of stuff. Was shot in Vietnam. John has seen it all, and is one of the most brilliant. John could tell you the story of Faust. Let me tell you. And he's brilliant, but he's bizarre, and he would write these incredibly funny things. One of the funniest writers around, and he would come with names like Weena Mercator is the Hopping Woman, Weed Memlo, just bizarre stuff.
Yeah,
he's brilliant.
And it's fascinating because I'm looking at this segment and it's almost like I was telling someone about the Venice Beach segment and I was talking to a few people about it, actually, a couple people, and one of them, I was just like, yeah, like, have you been there? And the person was like, yeah, there's like a bunch of hobos and stuff around, and like without ever being prompted at all. And I'm like, oh, you gotta see this, and play it apart. And it's so good. It's just like, but you're pulled there. I think a good writer often tends to pull from reality a lot, right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, we worked at our offises were at the Sherman Oaks Galleria, which was this mall in the middle of the valley. It was famous where the Valley Girls would go and stuff. And we would just, when we were struggling with writing, we'd go down to the mall and walk around and go into the video arcade, and we would play games and foosball and a lot of, like, that's where John came up with where they go and they're sucked into the computer game, and and we would just walk around the mall going, it'd be funny, maybe we could do this. And that's where Hero Boy came from, this little character that John came up with, who was originally known as
Astro Boy.
Yeah,
Hero Boy. Yeah.
It was originally known as Tintorino, the Naughty Cabana Boy, and John and I just laughed at that, and then we turned that into Hero Boy. Yeah, it was just stupid.
Way ahead of your time on this, because anime right now is taking off.
Yeah.
It's like thermonuclear. Right?
Yeah.
But
I have failed to succeed, and that's John McCann. Just the dumbest lines in the world.
It's so cool, and it is great. You watch this character, and he's it just seems like this great intro, and he goes up to the villain, and he just has no effect at all.
Yeah, I mean, and that's we're like, Freakazoid was the home of superpowers that they don't really do anything. It's just like It was legendary, and then you've got the Lord Bravery segments, which just, I mean, it's basically, it just transforms suddenly into a British comedy. Just, okay, now we're doing a British comedy. Yep.
And it works.
Yep.
I don't know, it's just, I think, it really was. I just mention this again, just the fact that you guys kind of just broke every single fourth wall in sight in the very beginning, and just everything opened up, so you could just do whatever, and it made sense. The Johnny Quest spoof, right? Like everything.
John. The guys that we actually got, Don Messick, who is from Hanna-Barbera. Careful there, race. Classic. We have to go. I mean, we had all those Hanna-Barbera people come and do it, and that was pretty amazing. I mean, a lot of people love Toby Danger.
So then, getting back to the writing aspect of things, what were some of the things that you enjoyed writing the most? I mean, it sounds like Sergeant Cosgrove was a big one, but what are the things you enjoyed writing most, and what did you find the most difficult in writing these episodes?
Action is always the hardest to write. Like, what the sequence is, what happens, because it's really complicated. So that's why we kind of avoided it. On Animaniacs, I would always beg off the ones that were more physical rather than verbal, because you literally have to write. He grabs the fish goes on his head, it falls to the ground, the ball rolls, and you're like, so that's why I was always more with the verbal parody. But every single script was a struggle. It's and this was true for Animaniacs, for me, for Freakazoid especially. I was the sort of writer where I would write the first page and spend the next week rewriting that first page. Like, no, the camera should be over here, and then they say this. And I remember there was one I wrote called The Freakazoid, which is a parody of The Godfather. And it starts, with that speech that's famous from The Godfather, the way The Godfather opens, right? And it's the same thing. And I rewrote that speech. This boy, his name is Snorts, not the Shriner. It was just this really dumb. And I remember I wrote that opening line for 1 week. And then it's like, is the script due? And I'm like, oh, it's coming, And then all of a sudden, a script would always, but I found that the way I work is, when I'm writing that, my brain is actually working on the other stuff.
I see.
I just don't know where it's going yet. And when I finish this page and I go to page 2, I think I know where I'm going. So it would always be sometimes 2 weeks on the first page and about 8 hours for the next 30.
Wow,
And that's just the way it would always work. It would be like, and I think John was the same way. It was struggle. And the other thing about Freakazoid is, since we didn't pitch out what the idea was, if we got like 3 pages in and we're like, this is not happening, we just changed the story.
Right.
Because
you had such freedom with that.
Yeah. So I remember I was writing the Amadeus one, the Norm Abram, This Old Freakalair, and I thought, well, this what this should be. And, sometimes you're wrong, and it was like, it will be Norm Abram helps Freakazoid remodel the Freakalair. And I go, this is brilliant. And then I got like 3 pages in, and I go, this is garbage. I don't know where to go for 30 pages. I'm out of ideas. And I was listening to the Amadeus soundtrack. I always listen to soundtracks. Always listen, because it really helps you to write or not. Yeah, or me anyway.
I do that too. Movie soundtracks, right?
Yeah. And I was listening to Amadeus, and I remember I was like, "Oh man, what am I gonna do?" And I was like, "Freakazoid is, or Norm Abram is Mozart. The Loeb is Salieri. Go!" Like, it was like, I get it. Oh my gosh, yes, let's do this. Yeah, I was really excited. And I think I wrote that in like a day or something, because once you know, then you know. And every choice is like,
momentum.
But it's getting there is pain. It can be really hard.
Well, you got a lot of stress too. You got, people, your job is on the line, and you got people kind of harassing you for it.
Yeah, we'd have production managers that would come in and go, do we have a second act yet? And I'd be like, nope. And she'd be like, 'cause we kind of need a second act. And I'd be like, no, I don't have it yet. And I was always the latest one. I was like, and I don't know. I can't imagine working in a company doing that now. It's like, it's not there. Sorry. Maybe tomorrow. Yeah.
So I know we were talking about the secret unreleased episode in a way, and it wasn't never animated, but you had the script and everything. My friend Dave, who you met, wanted me to ask you about if Freakazoid did authentically continue. I mean, I have to assume that episode would certainly be one you'd want to do, but is there any ideas or concepts that you really wanted to do that you had never gotten a chance to do because it ended after the second season?
Not really. I'm sure there are others. I know that by that time we really knew that the Freakazoid Cosgrove relationship was like really fun to like continue working on. But really, it was just be like, keep going, just do more stuff. But there's really no idea. There was one. Like, there was a West Side Story thing I was thinking of once, but but we had a ton of ideas, but we were canceled halfway through our second season, but we had to finish writing them anyway. So that's when the wheels came off the bus, and we're like, screw it. We're having fun. So yeah,
you guys can tell because you were talking about the show being canceled in like the 8th or 9th episode, right?
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
It's classic.
Yeah.
I had to ask because I just feel like you look at the internet today, you look at like all the Chad memes and like the political stuff, and like even like the social media censorship is its own sort of antagonist in a way, right? And it's like in one of the episodes, you guys portray a censor as this like very nerdy kind of, which really was like kind of the image of the censor at the time, this like kind of old woman, overly librarian kind of look, kind of boring, just doesn't want anything entertaining or interesting.
I'm the network censor. Yeah.
Gosh, so good at this, so good. And it's so like that censor's changed the image of the censor, right?
Well, now there is self-censorship. Now it's like, oh no, we can't do that. That's what are you talking about? Like, there is such a fear of doing anything. It's really kind of boring.
I guess that's true to all comedy right now, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, comedy is basically, until someone brings it back. But yeah, it's just, we don't want to do that. We don't want to do that. We don't want to do that. And of course, you don't want to ever, but some of the things that we did were just fun, And we never got censored. I don't recall anyone ever being like, hey, what are you doing? I guess the only thing was Roddy McStew was originally a Chinese man named Wo Wu.
Whoa, woo!
Yeah, who was Wo Wu, and it was like, what you do, Freakazoid, you know? And it was just this really, and I remember they were like, I don't think so. You can make fun of Scotsmen, but you can't. We don't want to do that. And I was like, okay, you know, it was like, I get it, you know, whatever.
It was just once.
Yeah, it was once. Yeah, so okay.
So good. So we are short on time right now, so we're gonna wrap up now, but we're gonna do part 2.
Yes,
right.
I would love to.
And we're going to get into the political side of things.
Yes.
Paul is conservative, Trump supporter, right?
Yeah.
And we would like to talk about that, get into that, talk about some of the consequences, some of the things he's experienced, seen, been through, all that stuff. So stay tuned. This will be coming soon when we get a shot, when we get a chance to make it happen. But come back, and thank you for coming on. This has been awesome.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
It was very, very fun.
Any last remaining words that you want to tell the audience of?
I'm going to prepare for the next one. I'm going to read what I wrote for the Freakazoid reboot.
Oh,
so
gosh.
I'll be able to tell you more. Maybe I'll bring the script.
You're going to bring it?
Sure,
yeah,
I'll
just
bring it. Yeah, I'll bring it. Yeah,
just flip through it.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. All right, well, thanks for coming on.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.